I just read the specifications. They are also quite good, but I haven't touched it or seen it in use.
But I don't hear much of a rush, people
Correct.
standing in queue and all,
Correct. So
unlike it happened earlier.
yeah. So
Other
as I
models.
said, all the tech savvy people would feel that, oh, what is the big difference? In fact, there may be some features which you don't get in JioPhone, which you get in the normal smartphones, top of the line smartphones. No,
Okay.
what you get, you may not get in Jio.
Okay.
So tech savvy people won't really opt for it in a hurry.
And already people who have already have one or two smartphones,
Huh.
there is no point in buying one more.
No, mostly it will go to the lower end, people in villages, people where no
Correct.
English is a barrier.
Correct.
So they will now come under the digital world. They will come
Yes,
into
sir. Sir,
the
it is that JioPhone is targeted to those income group
correct,
people only.
correct.
Right.
That is what I also feel. So
Which
that's
are
how it is.
old phones, around 250, 300 million
Yes,
phones are there. What we call feature phone.
yes,
They will convert it to smartphone at a very
yeah.
less cost. That is the plan.
So
Right. I think we'll start.
yeah, I think
Sir,
we'll get
before
down
start,
to
I'll just make one or two announcements.
sure, sure.
One is that you all know that now today is the 14th class. We have two more classes. So that class by Bhavsar sir will be on next Tuesday, 16, same time, where sir will cover the blockchain and other topics. And that is sort of the final session. And then followed by our 19th, next Friday is our last session, 16th session. Okay, wherein we are going to have a class test. The class test will be MCQ and true false, like what you had earlier. And question topics will be all the topics covered by Dilesh, 3D printing, and all the topics covered by Bowser sir. Okay, so please prepare accordingly. Bowser sir, all sessions have already come. And Dilesh also, I think, has shared. PPT, if he has not shared, I'll ask him to send it to you. Okay, so this is the thing. And then group project, I think all of you have submitted the return that we'll discuss later. Right.
Yes,
So
Teja, you
this,
have something to add?
yeah,
Yes. No,
Teja,
no, sir. Actually, when is the class test?
class
Date?
test is on 19th. 1 9.
19th. Okay, sir.
Anything is there on 19th? Does it clash with any other activity or anything? You let me know.
No, sir. 19th, Friday. Okay.
Friday. Okay. So unless something else is there, because I see your timetable also in a week, out of the 30 odd or 40 session, you hardly have, I think, only half, even less. On average, every day you have only 2 or 3 sessions, which means most of the time you are free. So I hope you are all preparing well for that. For- Okay. 19th morning. The time will decide. Okay, whether 12:15 or afternoon, that I will decide. But 19th we'll have to finish off because thereafter I have to prepare for my second semester classes, so I don't want to delay beyond that. Okay, right. Okay, sir, take over.
Fine. So, okay, so we go ahead. Let me just switch to the presentation screen and please tell me if it's okay. So, are you able to see the presentation screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stick to
Yes.
this screen only. So let me start by saying that while artificial intelligence and machine language, are buzzwords, we have been hearing it left, right, and center. But I'm sure there will be a lot of things here which you will learn, which you have never heard of before, right? Or you have not really understood. And even today, I know many people are grappling with what happens in artificial intelligence. What is this artificial intelligence? And how is machine learning any different from artificial intelligence, or how are they connected, interrelated? I'm sure a lot of these questions must be running through your mind, and this session should hopefully give you better clarity and bring you some uh, concepts which will be useful to you in the days ahead, right? Now this topic is definitely a little heavier than the earlier topics, so please focus on just concentrating on what is being discussed. I will be playing actually 3 short videos of less than 5 minutes each, because the videos tell things better than what I can tell, and you will be able to understand it faster because the graphics are very well made there, and that's difficult for me to do it here. So we'll have some videos. There could be some little technical glitches. I hope that doesn't happen. We have done one video before, so I'm confident that it should go through fine. Uh, the other part is we are starting almost 15 to 18 minutes behind schedule. So I will be overshooting, but fortunately the next session is by Murthy sir. So I have his permission to complete this session as best as possible. Please reserve your questions for the end because I want to go through this presentation first and then you can ask questions if at all. Of course, the option of sending queries by email still stands. Okay. So let me start by saying that all of you are familiar with Siri or Cortana or Alexa. Is there anybody who hasn't heard of these three names? I'm sure nobody. I mean, all of you have heard at least one of these names, and I think all of you have almost used any one
Alexa.
of them. And
Yeah,
Alexa
Alexa.
probably is the most popular, but people who use iPhone and all might be using Siri, which also works quite well. People who are Microsoft fans or focusing more on Microsoft products might be using Cortana here and there. Of course, Alexa is the most popular because they have standalone devices. Okay, and now I think Apple is also bringing in those kind of devices. But Alexa is very well established in the market, very competitively priced, and very what do you call loud by children and to some extent by parents because lots of questions asked by children are now answered by Alexa. If I'm not wrong, you might
How
have.
much it costs, sir? What is the price?
It can vary from something like 3,000 to 5,000 depending on which model you buy.
Oh, that's all.
Yeah.
It is available in any
Oh, it's available in all stores. You just need to buy it from Amazon, follow the instructions, and you can set it up. You need an internet connection to
Uh-huh.
set it up and actually use it well.
Oh, and
Okay.
then that means I can, by existing broadband connection, I can
Yeah,
actually
through Wi-Fi, it will connect. Everything connects through Wi-Fi. These
Wi-Fi.
days,
Like
no, you have to be a little. I mean, you have to be savvy about how Wi-Fi works. Your router, it's the band at which it operates, 2.4, 5 gigahertz.
okay.
The specifications like B, G, A, N, AC. Those things you must read and be familiar. Then you can optimize or get the best out of these devices because they work with different protocols and you should know which protocol is good for you. By and large, the G protocol and the N protocol are universal, but if you're using Apple and you are having a 5 gigahertz band available on your router, you
Okay.
should use that if you don't have to cross too many walls because it is short distance but high data transfer. So this
Oh,
is just a tip from my side. Otherwise, stick to B, G, N, not B, sorry, G and N should serve your purpose well, right?
and this is made by Google, I think. Google,
And Alexa is Amazon.
Amazon. Okay.
Amazon. Alexa is made by Amazon, right? The reason I mentioned these three names is all of them use artificial intelligence, okay, in varying extents. And I'll try to again come back to these things now and then, depending on what we are talking about. But just bear in mind that they all are based on artificial intelligence for different tasks that it goes to different levels of artificial intelligence. And in some cases, machine learning is involved. In some cases neural networks is involved, and in some and the first level which it has to handle is what is called the natural language processing. I'll be introducing this briefly in one slide for each, and there are some videos which will make you understand how these things work. Okay, so that is one part. Let me start with the first slide, which is what is known as a simple quiz board. Any of you have seen a quiz board like this? This one was made by a student in electrical engineering as a project, and it answers typical theoretical questions which might be asked in a viva or an oral test, or you could play a game. Actually, you could make any kind of quiz using this kind of technique or the principle behind this. Any of you have seen this, used this? Have you come across toys which you can press some buttons or touch something and it will tell you what is the capital of a given country? Actually, that is where commercially it has been put to use. This
Oh,
one is made by some student but I got a good photograph, so I put it. I couldn't find a photograph of an actual commercial game, but I believe they are there in the market. So you have a board like this, you touch a wire. So here you see the red wire and the black wire, right? So you keep the black wire at the question. Now you move the red wire to one of the answers. If your answer is right, this light blinks or this light will come on. If your answer is wrong, it doesn't come on. So the point here is, do you think that this board itself has some level of intelligence? Because it can give you the correct, I mean, the light will come only when the answer is correct. Okay. So this was the crudest form of artificial intelligence. In fact, this is purely, it's a purely mechanical electrical device, right? Mechanical because you have the nuts and bolts just to conduct the electricity, and actually at the back of the board are the wiring done to make sure that you get the, only the light comes when the correct answer is touched. Okay, that's how this board works. This goes a little further. I have a bad throat, so please excuse me for that. This goes a little further when you start using a computer to do the same thing. A computer can do the same thing with a vast amount of data. So you might have heard, no, if you have watched episodes of Jeopardy, which is actually, or we had your, even your KBC for that matter, right? If all the questions and answers are given to the computer, then a computer will beat anybody at that game. That is actually the kind of power that is available to you if you can write code properly. And it's not a very difficult code. Anybody who has done C programming will be able to actually do it, right? So the point is, this is the introduction to artificial intelligence. So this is the crudest form of artificial intelligence. So let's see uh, uh, what is artificial intelligence. Okay, so uh, the definition is that this is intelligence demonstrated by machines as opposed to natural intelligence displayed by animals, including human beings. All right, and just keep it at the back of your mind that the whole game in artificial intelligence, actually, artificial intelligence is the mother domain, right? Machine language and other things are subsets of artificial intelligence. And the main goal of research, developments, technology application in artificial intelligence is to bring it closer to the way human beings think and act. Okay, that is the goal of artificial intelligence. So it is called artificial intelligence because it is demonstrated by a machine instead of a living being, right? And in that hierarchy, of course, the human beings come at the top. Artificial intelligence is a technology using which we can create intelligent systems that can simulate human intelligence. This is done using machine learning algorithms, and we'll be touching some of these things along the way. So you'll get some idea, because the word algorithm is heard 100 times, but you have never seen an algorithm, or you don't know what exactly it is. Okay, we'll try to close that gap also. And so this is done using a machine learning algorithm instead of lines of code of program, or instead of lines of program code that provide instructions about the task to be carried out. And I want to clarify this because this is at the root of the difference between what you do through coding, right? Computers do a lot of things simply by writing proper code. Okay, but now we are going one level higher. So in code, and if you have written code, I want to show you some examples and we'll see what is that. But here the point is that it uses machine learning algorithms instead of lines of code. And what do the lines of code do? They actually give instructions to the processor what is to be done for a particular question and give an answer accordingly. Okay, so if you want to find the area of a circle, the lines of code will tell that ask for the radius. You give the radius and then it has the formula inside, and that formula will calculate the answer or the area, and it will output this answer. This is what is meant by having lines of code which provide instructions to the computer. Okay, I may talk processor, but essentially for the normal person, what you see outside is the computer, and the computer is able to give you the correct answer. Okay, so a computer loaded with a program. But now here is where I'm trying to show you that there is a slight difference, but this is a major difference between a, a, a program instruction and a algorithm which machine has learned. So when a machine has learned algorithm, now a computer loaded with a program can calculate the area of a circle, and if the lines of code have only the formula for area of a circle, it can only give you the area of a circle for a given radius. Okay, but a computer that is loaded with a machine learning algorithm can identify circles of different sizes. uh, that is a little difference in the problem that is getting solved, but just understand the concept. The point is, a, a line of instructions given through code will give you an answer, but it will give you only one answer for that one problem. But when a machine has been taught to use an algorithm, it can do things which it has not actually been taught as well, simply because it has been taught something similar or something close to what question is being asked. So if here it is a case like you're showing photographs of circles of different sizes to a computer. Now the computer has to be first trained, that is, the algorithm has to be first trained. In the training, it actually looks at hundreds or thousands of photographs, and then it will store it in its memory in some way, not necessarily the full image. Also, it can store it in different ways. Okay, but having stored that, it can extrapolate, interpolate, and from there, even if a particular size of a circle has not been shown, right, it can tell you that this is a circle. That is the intelligence part, and that is coming through learning. Just keep this concept in your mind. We'll see it in use in different places. Now, one of the simplest ways to understand whether a machine is intelligent or not, okay, so because that is the starting point for artificial intelligence, is what is known as the Turing test. Just bear in mind, this test was designed in 1950 by this person called Alan Turing, right? And he is supposed to be the pioneer of artificial intelligence because he gave a simple test. He said, take two rooms, right? And in the third room, right, you put a judge and connect these two rooms to the third room. Now the judge will type questions on his computer or through a slip or something. Now a human occupies one of the two rooms. Okay, so let's say if it is room A, B, and C, the judge is sitting in room C. There is a human being sitting in room A and a computer sitting in room B. Okay, now the judge will send a question, maybe through computer, maybe through a slip or whatever. Both these A and B rooms, answers will come. Now, when many questions are asked, and if the answers have come, and after seeing those answers, if the judge cannot tell clearly which one is the human being and which one is the computer, then you have a computer that is intelligent. That is what the Turing test says. Very simple concept, but it clearly brings out the fact that a computer can answer questions just as well as a human being. Of course, the domain from which questions are to be asked would have been specified. But the essential point is, if a computer can answer questions just like a human being and a judge cannot make out the difference, then that machine is intelligent. Now, when questions slightly related are asked and it cannot answer, that shows the level of intelligence. Okay, so when I say that it can show you, it can identify circles even if it has not seen that circle of that size, that is one level of intelligence. But if you show it a triangle, right, it may not know what it is at all because it has not been taught anything about triangles. So that is where a limit is reached, and then the attempt is, how do you now take it to the next level? That is all that keeps on happening. But also I should add that we have gone far ahead of these simple situations. So that was in 1950. Okay, today we are on 2010, so it's 60 years down the lane, right? And now they say that artificial intelligence can be classified into three categories. One is called weak AI, one is called general AI, and you have strong AI. Okay, and the point here is that we even today, by today's standards, most of the people agree that we have covered weak AI. So that identifying circles kind of thing is weak AI. Okay, uh, but we are just touching the top of general AI. All right, I mean, now we are into neural networks, and because of that, we are doing something which is a little beyond weak AI. They have their own yardsticks by which they can tell that this is weak AI or this is general AI. It is actually the addition of neural networks. Okay, so but we haven't been able to add that much volume of neural networks as which we'll see later as human beings can handle. That's why they say that we are still completely, you can say, we have covered weak AI, but we have just touched the tip of general AI. Strong AI is still many decades down the line. We don't know when we will reach that. The ideal case of saying that we have reached strong AI is, can it do almost everything that a human being can do? Ideally speaking, it should be able to do even better than what human beings can do. That's what has been depicted in many movies. Okay, so strong AI would be if a computer or which can take the form of a desktop or a humanoid. All right, uh, whether it can do things same as what human beings can do, and maybe do even better than that. Okay, then you have strong AI. That is the way in which you have to look at the classification of artificial intelligence. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So we say that we are still in the weak AI, which is also known as artificial narrow intelligence. So the technical classification is artificial narrow, artificial general, and artificial super, right? And your Siri, Alexa, Cortana, they are all still considered in the category of weak AI. We still have far to go. But you have this second situation like artificial general AI. When you start looking at, have you heard of Deep Blue? Have you heard of AlphaGo? Okay, but you have read somewhere, no, that even the best grandmasters of chess have lost to the machine developed by IBM. Actually, that is called Deep Blue. The best grandmasters in the world have lost, and there is a slide on that also later. But those have started using neural networks, and the volume of data that has been fed to these algorithms is so high that in specific domains, so for they did this only for chess, or they did this only for the game of Go, right? And then they have reached the stage where this machine can beat all the grandmasters. As on date, whenever matches have happened of late recently, right, then the computer always wins, simply because those algorithms have learned now a good amount of moves that are possible in these games. So there is where we are touching the tip of, they say that this is just the tip of general, because it is still limited to a specific domain. Okay, so for artificial super intelligence, can you cover multiple domains? Can you cover complicated domains? These are the areas that they are now looking at, and we'll go back to this in a little bit more detail. Okay, now this is a diagram which shows the timeline of evolution of work in the area of artificial intelligence. You can consider artificial intelligence, as I said, as the overall mother domain, right? Actually, machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and what we call deep learning is a further subset of machine learning. So deep learning necessarily is a subset of artificial intelligence. The point is, we started thinking, how do we make computers intelligent? Then we found that instead of just writing lines of code and making it intelligence, can we make it learn just like we teach our children? Actually, what they are doing is, just like you teach children, right, you are teaching computers. And that is exactly what is done in NLP, that is the natural language processing, which is the first program that your Alexa uses, right? Because the first thing it has to do is listen to your voice, convert that into text, convert that into binary, and then process it as requested. So that is where NLP comes. NLP is related but done in a slightly different way, which we will see. Okay, so remember this is the evolution. So starting in 1950s with artificial intelligence, between 1980 and 2000 or 2010, we were able to enhance machine learning tools and techniques and the volume of data, uh, uh, and the type of data also. We'll come to that also. And now after 2010, we are focusing on deep learning. Okay, so that is how it is evolving. So now let us look at what is machine learning. Okay, so machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence which enables machine to learn from past data. This is the key point here. Machines learning from past data or experiences without being explicitly programmed. Okay, so here, just for people who have a little knowledge of coding, I will try to show you the difference. Earlier also we used to write lines of code, but the lines of code had direct instructions for the computer to give the output. Just understand this. You have lines of code in which, the steps are given, and at the last step it will automatically be able to give you the result. Okay, because the way in which the code is written, and the code can do everything. But now when you do machine learning, you are actually teaching it through an algorithm. The algorithm itself is a piece of code. The algorithm also requires lines of code, but now the lines of code don't simply complete some task. It tells the computer how to carry out the task. Okay, so for example, if we looked at area of a circle, it will have the formula somewhere, but it will have the formula along with formulas for all kinds of shapes. Okay, so the first thing it tries to teach the machine is first understand whose area you have to find. So it has to recognize whether it's a circle, triangle, rectangle, polygon, whatever. Okay, and then it will go and look at the appropriate form. So that also is taught to the computer, that if it is an area that is to be found, then look at the shape, look at the drawing, look at the picture. All those options are learned by the computer. That is where neural networking and all that comes into picture. So there is this difference. In machine learning, you write algorithm using lines of code. In normal computer programming, you write a program which is lines of code which directly act on the question and give you the answer itself. Whereas in machine learning, it does not directly give the answer. It forces the machine to go searching. Okay, how do I get this answer? That is the main point, and I'll try to just bring some more clarity to that. So machine learning enables a computer system using preloaded algorithms. So this algorithm's main aim is to teach the machine by looking at thousands of records of data. Okay, or maybe lakhs, or maybe even millions. Right? There are situations where it has to look at. They actually show it millions of possibilities, millions of data points or data sets. Okay, about something that has actually happened in the past, and from that it can draw an inference as to what, or to make predictions or even take decisions without human being doing anything there. So that is without human intervention. So machine learning uses a massive amount of structured and unstructured data. We'll just quickly look at what is structured and unstructured also, so that the machine learning model can generate accurate results because it has learned how to analyze the question, right? And it has in its memory possibilities of what could be the answer, or how to arrive at the answer. And that is how it gives predictions. So let me just start by I'm focusing here on this part without being explicitly programmed. Okay, so this is the point to be clarified using this slide. So if you have been writing programs, you will draw a flow chart. Supposing this is the area of a circle, this will be the flow chart. So you start, ask for the radius, and it is already written in the lines of code here, right? So here when you say float r is the radius. So this is where you are ready that, okay, put some variable name r into which you will take the radius. And then you will have a variable called area. And if you want perimeter, you will have an area called variable called perimeter also. Then this question is asked. This comes on the screen. Okay. And after that, this is taken into the computer, and then it has this formula. Okay. And this formula is used. Now you're given r, right? And then it will calculate this r on area, and in this case the perimeter also. And then this printf statement actually brings the line output on the screen. So what you see as area equal to, that comes because of this one. Okay. Similarly for perimeter. But this flowchart is for radius, and if you remove the line for perimeter, it will be for this. So this is how conventional code is used by computers to give you the right answer. But as I said, this can only give you the area of a circle. It cannot give you the area of a triangle, because that is not part of this code, that is not coded here. So let's go down further and see some more concepts. So here you see what is an algorithm. Okay, now an algorithm is pre-written programs, okay, for very specific purposes. All right, so you have a variety of them. All right, and we'll come to these two things later. This is unsupervised learning, supervised learning. As I said, we have to teach the machines, or machines have to learn. When machines learn along with a human being helping the machine, you have supervised learning. When machines learn without any human being telling something to that machine, you have unsupervised learning. So when it is unsupervised learning, they have identified what kind of algorithms are suitable for that kind of learning by a machine. And we are not going into details of what is inside each of these algorithms, but to make you understand, what is this suitability of an algorithm for a particular application is something like this. Let us say you are driving by car on the highway. Okay, so you will be looking at how many kilometers you have covered, and then let's say you are looking at, okay, how much fuel have I consumed. All right, so assuming that the road is similar all through, what do you think is the relationship between the kilometers covered and the fuel that is consumed? Can you tell me? It's an easy question, right? So if I say that the car gives you 10 kilometers per liter, and you have traveled 100 kilometers, so how much petrol would you have used? I think that's an easy question, right? The car has a fuel efficiency of 10 kilometers to a liter. It has traveled 100 kilometers. How much petrol has got consumed? Are you with me? Is it not 10 liters?
Yes, sir.
Right? It is 10. So now if you have traveled 200, what does it become? If you have traveled 200 kilometers, how much petrol would you have consumed, or fuel would you have consumed? 20 liters?
Yes, sir. 20.
So the point is, there is a direct relationship. In this particular example, it is called a linear relationship, right? And therefore, you can say that a linear regression is a better algorithm, or this algorithm, and this is all done with the help of statistics and data, and analyzing data, looking at the output. From there they have concluded. So what you have to understand is, these are the algorithms. Depending on what you want the computer to do, you will use an appropriate, sometimes you will use more than one algorithm. Okay, keep that in mind, because the computers may be moving from one domain to another. Sometimes you may be using much more than two or three algorithms from here. But just to give you an idea where an algorithm is useful, is where I gave you this example, which can be solved if this machine has been loaded with the linear regression algorithm, and you have fed it some amount of data. Right, let's say you fed data for 100 kilometers, 200, 300, 400, 500. Now if you ask how much it will consume for 650 kilometers or 450 kilometers, don't you think it can quickly give you the answer? Because it would have now, and because it is linear regression, it understands variables, it understands the changes in the values of variables. Okay, now this is the simplest case. Mostly computers are not doing only this. All right, suppose I were to ask, add time also. So how much time did it take to cover 100 kilometers? How much time did it? So now you're bringing in one more variable. And actually you can go on adding more variables. That is called a multivariable problem. So you can see the complexity that arises. But this can be put into an algorithm, and this algorithm can be fed into a machine, and past actual data, when you feed, after that it can do extrapolation, interpolation, and give you any kind of answer related to that kind of situation. Do you get this point? That is the purpose of an algorithm, right? And that is what algorithm is all about. Now algorithms need different types of data also. So the two broad categories are structured data and unstructured data. Okay, so and you need to be familiar with some of this terminologies, because it is important when you actually start thinking more and more about how these things work. Then you need to have a concept clear about these things. See, if you look at your age, if you look at your weight, if you look at your height, right, it's easy to put it down as a number. Am I right? If you add your first name, then also you just have one string. Okay, let it be as any number of characters, but that is one string. Okay, but till that point, this data can be represented in the form of rows and columns in a spreadsheet. Okay, but if you add address, if you add photo, right, so you have your contacts list in your phone, right, it allows you to put a photo also, it allows you to add addresses also, it allows you to keep notes also. Okay, when was the last time I called this person? If you want to track that, you could go and put it in notes, no, because your telephone history may be difficult to search. So some important persons you can even go and put in notes, the last time I talked to this person was in this. Or supposing I have to remember the name of his wife and his children, now I can go and put that in notes. Maybe you've not realized that, but you can do this, so that next time you call and it's a courtesy social call, you can say, okay, so how are your children doing? Where is so and so? Where is so and so? Most of the time, at least with me, it has happened, I forget the names. Okay, and that's because I may be talking to them after 2 years, 3 years. I'm sure some situations like this occur in your life too, but you could put it in those names, in the notes. Okay, the moment you bring things like photographs or long strings or many words into one field, you have unstructured data, and that is the main difference. Structured data, you can easily put it into a table. Unstructured data mostly is data which has images, which has audio, right? If you want what songs, if it is videos, this is what is used by Netflix. Okay, or even Amazon Prime, or you have emails, then you have unstructured. So keep this concept clear. And also, as a business issue, remember, or just look at this, that only 20% of data in the world, right, is structured data today. As if you analyze the data in all computers today, Gartner says 80% is unstructured data. 80%. Okay, so that is something which you have to keep in mind. All right, and we'll be using this in knowledge at a subsequent stage. So this is the main difference between structured data and unstructured data. The other part you have to just understand is, this is again for concept point of view. In the process of teaching machines how to learn, you have to do all these 7 steps. First of all, you need past data, and you have to gather as much data as you can. Of course, it depends on how accurate an application you want. Okay, so if you want to find the area of a circle, triangle, cylinder, polygon, whatever, if these are the kind of questions you want the machine to solve, gathering data is not really required, because it has explicit formulae. Okay, so there the amount of data gathering could be less. But when we are talking of, look at say something like a Netflix. Okay, Netflix keeping track of what kind of movies you normally watch, who are the directors, who are the actors, what kind of story you like, is it war stories, is it ghost stories, is it crime stories, and again within that, which lead actors you prefer, which directors you prefer. All this is actually now becoming unstructured data. But you have to gather them, then you have to prepare it also, so you have to arrange it in some way, and all the data you should be able to arrange in that particular way. So you have to prepare the data. You may even have to remove some data which is really not matching. For example, once in a blue moon you watch some ghost story, whereas most of the time you are watching military movies. Okay, so it may keep that on the side. So that is part of preparing that. Sometimes the data in other applications, like you see IoT, IoT devices transfer huge volume of data. Okay, and sometimes because of some reasons, data might have stopped at some point in time, because the power was gone or the sensor became bad, or sometimes it may be giving erroneous data because the calibration went off, right? All these things actually happen in reality, and you have to plan for this. So first you gather data, then you look at it, and then you eliminate that which you see are clearly inaccurate. And then you choose that model depending on the application. You choose a appropriate algorithm, and then feed this data. That is the training part. You feed this data to the algorithm, and after that you bring some more information which it has never been fed. Okay, and then see whether it can give you correct answer. So as I said, if I have told the computer that for 100 kilometers I use 10 liters, 200 it was 20, and so on. Now I bring data like 450 or 650 which it has never seen, which I have not fed into that, and see whether it is able to give you the correct answer. The point is, if it gives correct answer, fine. But in some cases, it may still deviate, especially when you think of things like Netflix, or there are other applications which are very critical. Like how does a computer program diagnose disease based on the inputs provided by the patient to the doctor? So the doctor feeds all of this. But human beings have different additional properties or qualities. That somebody may have a genetic problem, but somebody may not be a genetic problem. Somebody may have a very poor lifestyle. Another person is actually living a healthy lifestyle, but the symptoms may seem the same. This is where hyperparameter tuning comes. That means, again, you will see further on where this tuning is required. Okay, so you have to do some more changes to the data, or you have to do some more changes to the algorithm which is going to process this data, and then you will get predictions which are nearly accurate, which again you compare with actuals. That is again the past data which you collected, you connect with the actual correct answer also, and then you will be able to understand whether this machine is really working accurately or not. Right? So in that you have these machine learning techniques, or these are the methods by which you teach machines. Okay, so you have what you call supervised learning and unsupervised learning. These are the two broad categories. Reinforcement learning is only further doing fine tuning. So we said that hyper parameter tuning, that kind of thing is reinforcement learning, where you see that in certain situations it is not so straightforward. Okay, then you may have to add some, you have to do some fine tuning in the algorithm, or sometimes fine tuning in the data. Mostly you try to do it through the algorithm, because data is data, it comes from outside. Algorithm is still in your hands, and through that, and or sometimes it is simply feeding it more and more sample data. For example, for AlphaGo to defeat the reigning champion, right? They had to feed millions of games, and it took them many years. It took them many years. The company is called DeepMind. I think it started in 2010, and only in 2016 they had a program that could beat any grandmaster. So you can see the kind of period that was required for them to fine tune that algorithm. So this reinforcement learning is to only enhance accuracy. Otherwise, it is supervised learning or unsupervised learning. In supervised learning, some human being is actually giving them the questions as well as the answers. Okay, in unsupervised learning, it is only showing them different situations, right? So in supervised learning, quite often it is structured data. In unsupervised learning, it is quite often unstructured data, and with unstructured data you necessarily may have to go for unsupervised learning, because then the machine only has to learn. There are no direct ways to get at the answer. Okay, so let us see a slide which shows what happens in each of them, mainly the supervised and the unsupervised. So supervised data, when you're teaching the machine, you have, let's take assume these are all pictures, and the pictures which are shown to the computer. So you show this picture to the computer, and at the same time, when you show each one by one, you will say, okay, this, put it as hexagon. Then you show this one, say, you will say this is square. You may again show a hexagon and say that this is hexagon. Then you show a triangle, and then you say it is a triangle. You again show a hexagon, and then you say it is hexagon. You go on like this. Okay, and then you suddenly, afterwards, show pictures of 3 4 things. It could be rectangle, it could be pentagon. It will say, I don't know for pentagon, but all the others. So if you if you feed it a triangle, a square, and a pentagon, right, it will tell you that this is a square, this is a triangle. If you have fed it a pentagon, it will say I don't know, or it will not answer, or it's a unknown. That depends on how you have written the code. But essentially, this is called labels. That means you have told the computer what is the image that you are showing. This is what happens when you want to identify a dog or a cat. So you show thousands of pictures of different dogs, right, and you tell that this is a dog. Okay, then it will be able to, most probably, depending, if you have shown billions of pictures, I'm sure it can identify any dog. Okay, so that is where the reinforcement comes. When you increase the volume of data and you make it more and more accurate, you cover everything possible. In unsupervised, the difference is you don't tell what it is. You don't tell whether it's a square or a circle or a hexagon or whatever. You simply go on showing pictures, and then the output will come like, okay, I have seen one category. It will say this is category 1, category 2, category 3. Afterwards, you may name this as rectangle, circle, or hexagon. Right? You don't give any label to the computer in the beginning. This comes in the end, if at all you want. Otherwise, it will simply say, I have category 1 in which I have 2 items. Right? So if you have shown it images like this, all these images, when you have shown, at the end it will tell you, I saw category 1, 2 numbers, category 2, 2 numbers, category 3, 3 numbers. But this is unsupervised learning. Okay, so it has learned, and if you have shown many shapes, it can identify those shapes. But this is a simple way to understand supervised and unsupervised. In reality, it is even much more complicated, and you have to take a lot of pain while teaching that machine. So again, in reinforcement, you would have seen that robots are used in the car assembly line to do different type of tasks, right? It can be doing welding, it can be doing lifting and shifting, it might be tightening bolts, it might be placing an engine inside the chassis. Okay, for each of these tasks, you can't go on showing pictures. So what do? You tie sensors to the body of the people who are doing it before. Then that is how data is collected. So every muscle pull, every load, right, is recorded in terms of the tension that your muscle is doing. Okay, so these tensions for different tasks and activities are recorded. Again, you collect thousands, lakhs, and billions of data like this. Now your robo, right, which is nothing but an intelligent machine, will be able to precisely understand, okay, for this bolt, what is the strength or how much turns I have to do. It will know by itself, because it has seen thousands of records. It knows where a bolt will go and where an engine will go, because again, that has been recorded in its memory through the data that was fed. Are you getting this point?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So next we move to neural network, because part of this happens through the use of neural network. Now, what's a neural network? A neural network is nothing but we are just trying to replicate how your mind works. What are you trying to do? You are trying to replicate how your mind works. Okay, and when we create that kind of a system, it is called an artificial neural network. It is but actually in our brain, and there are neurons. Okay, and we are just kind of copying that same system, and we create what is called an artificial neural network, which, because it is composed of artificial neurons. Neural networks reflect the behavior of the human brain. In other words, in simple words, it just tries to copy and do or work in a way your brain works. Just remember this important fact. A fully developed human brain has 86 billion neurons. Now, this should give you an idea as to why we say we haven't reached, even we haven't completed the general AI. The next level is super AI. To be able to reach super AI, we should be having computer algorithms and hardware designed such that it is having an equivalent of 86 billion or more neurons. Then maybe we'll be able to surpass human beings. Just to give you a pictorial view, what is inside your brain. Okay, you know that you have a left brain and a right brain. Okay, so the artificial neural network is something like this. Your actual brain is something like this. Again, so you have a left and right, but you can also slice it. if you slice it, you'll get three major layers like this. Okay, and they have a number. It goes from 1 to 12 here, then from 13 to 24 here, then 25 to 36 here, and they have, through other medical research, they have identified what each and everything does, which domain it addresses, what is responsible for your sight, what is responsible for your taste, what is responsible for smell, and so many other functions of the body. That is actually coming from an understanding of all of these. This we are trying to map it into circuits. Okay, and then through the video I'll be showing, you will understand how those circuits analyze the data coming to them, which comes as input, and do this filtering, which is exactly what happens in your brain. Okay, and then gives the output just in the way your body reacts to certain stimulus or inputs. Again, just for your information, this is your brain, right? And if you take a small part of the brain, it will look like this. This is one of the neurons, and this neuron actually is studied in so much detail. They have identified even the components of the neuron. Okay, and you have to make 86 billion such neurons if you want to be able to do something that human beings can do. And this is how they plan the circuits, or that is how uh, the artificial neural networks are created, by understanding this. Don't worry, you don't need to understand everything of this, you just remember that this is how they are interconnected. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video, and that will tell you something more. Let me see, I'll try to switch to the video, and before that I may have to stop sharing. Okay, and let me just open my video, and then we go back to the screen of the video. Okay, so fine. So can you see a different screen now with the sun on top?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a video.
Family and I visited Russia. Even though none of us could read Russian,
Listen
we did not have
carefully.
any trouble in figuring our way out, all thanks to Google's real-time translation of Russian boards into English. This is just one of the several applications of neural networks. Neural networks form the base of deep learning, a subfield of machine learning where the algorithms are inspired by the structure of the human brain. Neural networks take in data, train themselves to recognize the patterns in this data, and then predict the outputs for a new set of similar data. Let's understand how this is done. Let's construct a neural network that differentiates between a square, circle, and triangle. Neural networks are made up of layers of neurons. These neurons are the core processing units of the network. First, we have the input layer, which receives the input. The output layer predicts our final output. In between exist the hidden layers, which perform most of the computations required by our network. Here's an image of a circle. This image is composed of 28 by 28 pixels, which make up for 784 pixels.
So sorry, what do you see there? No, let me go back to that actually.
Last summer, my family and I visited Russia, even though none of us could read 84 pixels.
Sorry, I was supposed to pause. So you see, this is 784 pixels. Actually, here what you see, this should also be 784. Here it is just a representation. Okay, so just bear that in mind. And here they are showing two hidden layers, right? Now, when you go for reinforcement learning, or when you want to show a lot of data and make your algorithm work accurately, these layers will increase. That is the main point you should just keep in mind, but try to understand what it is saying. You may not understand this fully in one go. All these I'm showing 3 videos, all 3 are from a site called simplylearn.com. This is one of the best sites I have found to understand different concepts and to explain them lucidly. And since they do it better than what I can do, I thought I should show you this video, and you can go back to this. These links are there in the student notes, which I'll be sending to you. Okay, so just continue and pay attention.
Each pixel is fed as input to each neuron of the first layer. Neurons of one layer are connected to neurons of the next layer through channels. Each of these channels is assigned a numerical value known as weight. The inputs are multiplied to the corresponding weights, and their sum is sent as input to the neurons in the hidden layer. Each of these neurons is associated with a numerical value called the bias.
So understand these weights and biases. These weights and biases are the way in which you can fine tune your algorithm. When you find it giving some wrong kind of answer, you can identify which place you have to go and change the weight, and accordingly the bias will change, and accordingly the calculation will change, and accordingly your answer will also change. Just watch this.
which is then added to the input sum. This value is then passed through a threshold function called the activation function. The result of the activation function determines if the particular neuron will get activated or not. An activated neuron transmits data to the neurons of the next layer over the channels. In this manner, the data is propagated through the network. This is called forward propagation. In the output layer, the neuron with the highest value fires and determines the output. The values are basically a probability. For example, here, our neuron associated with square has the highest probability. Hence, that's the output predicted by the neural network. Of course, just by a look at it, we know our neural network has made a wrong prediction. But how does the network figure this out? Note that our network is yet to be trained. During this training process, along with the input, our network also has the output fed to it. The predicted output is compared against the actual output to realize the error in prediction. The magnitude of the error indicates how wrong we are, and the sign suggests if our predicted values are higher or lower than expected. The arrows here give an indication of the direction and magnitude of change to reduce the error. This information is then transferred backward through our network. This is known as backpropagation. Now, based on this information, the weights are adjusted. This cycle of forward propagation and backpropagation is iteratively performed with multiple inputs. This process continues until our weights are assigned such that the network can predict the shapes correctly in most of the cases. This brings our training process to an end. You might wonder how long this training process takes. Honestly, neural networks may take hours or even months to train, but time is a reasonable trade-off when compared to its scope. Let us look at some of the prime applications of neural networks. Facial recognition. Cameras on smartphones these days can estimate the age of the person based on their facial features. This is neural networks at play, first differentiating the face from the background, and then correlating the lines and spots on your face to a possible age. Forecasting. Neural networks are trained to understand the patterns and detect the possibility of rainfall or a rise in stock prices with high accuracy. Music composition. Neural networks can even learn patterns in music and train itself enough to compose a fresh tune. So
that is one video. We'll be seeing a few more, two more in fact. So let me just get back to the presentation and okay, let me see. Fine. So we were here. So you have some idea about how the machine learning happens, right? Or the neural networks are created, or how they help. Okay. So now we just take a brief look at what is deep learning. So deep learning is now going one step ahead of machine learning. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which is essentially a neural network with 3 or more layers. So in the previous video, we saw that you had an input layer, you had an output layer, and between that, let's say you can have even one layer for very easy situations, for very easy kind of work, right? Or very easy topics to be taught to the computer. Even with one layer in between, you might be able to achieve that level of accuracy. But that is not what happens in real life. In real life and actual applications in practice, you need more layers. So when you have more than 3 layers or 3 or more layers, then it becomes deep learning. These neural networks attempt to simulate the behavior of the human brain by learning from large amounts of data, doing a lot of back and forth propagation, and that data gets stored, different values. So that those values and all those things, you don't worry, it is the mathematical part, but you just understand the concept. Okay, so while a neural network with a single layer can make approximate predictions, when you add layers, right, then it can help to optimize and refine it for accuracy. So we'll see one more video. Let me see if I can get that up properly. So this is about deep learning.
Ever wondered how Google translates and change the following statements in order?
1 minute. It's, I think you're still not seeing the video, right?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, I have to bring that.
You have to switch off the.
I have to switch off and switch on. That's the only problem that is there. Okay, so now you can see it, right?
Yeah.
To describe the working of a neural network.
Wait.
A. Ever wondered how Google translates an entire web page to a different language in a matter of seconds? Or your phone gallery groups images based on their location? All of this is a product of deep learning. But what exactly is deep learning? Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which in turn is a subset of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a technique that enables a machine to mimic human behavior. Machine learning is a technique to achieve AI through algorithms trained with data. And finally, deep learning is a type of machine learning inspired by the structure of the human brain. In terms of deep learning, this structure is called an artificial neural network. Let's understand deep learning better and how it's different from machine learning. Say we create a machine that could differentiate between tomatoes and cherries. If done using machine learning, we'd have to tell the machine the features based on which the two can be differentiated. These features could be the size and the type of stem on them. With deep learning, on the other hand, the features are picked out by the neural network without human intervention. Of course, that kind of independence comes at the cost of having a much higher volume of data to train our machine. Now, let's dive into the working of neural networks. Here, we have 3 students. Each of them write down the digit 9 on a piece of paper. Notably, they don't all write it identically. The human brain can easily recognize the digits. But what if a computer had to recognize them? That's where deep learning comes in. Here's a neural network trained to identify handwritten digits. Each number is present as an image of 28 times 28 pixels. Now, that amounts to a total of 784 pixels. Neurons, the core entity of a neural network, is where the information processing takes place. Each of the 784 pixels is fed to a neuron in the first layer of our neural network. This forms the input layer. On the other end, we have the output layer, with each neuron representing a digit with the hidden layers existing between them. The information is transferred from one layer to another over connecting channels. Each of these has a value attached to it, and hence is called a weighted channel. All neurons have a unique number associated with it called bias. This bias is added to the weighted sum of inputs reaching the neuron, which is then applied to a function known as the activation function. The result of the activation function determines if the neuron gets activated. Every activated neuron passes on information to the following layers. This continues up till the second last layer. The one neuron activated in the output layer corresponds to the input digit. The weights and bias are continuously adjusted to produce a well-trained network. So, where is deep learning applied? In customer support. When most people converse with customer support agents, the conversation seems so real. They don't even realize that it's actually a bot on the other side. In medical care, neural networks detect cancer cells and analyze MRI images to give detailed results. Self-driving cars, what seemed like science fiction, is now a reality. Apple, Tesla, and Nissan are only a few of the companies working on self-driving cars. So, deep learning has a vast scope, but it too faces some limitations. The first, as we discussed earlier, is data. While deep learning is the most efficient way to deal with unstructured data, a neural network requires a massive volume of data to train. Let's assume we always have access to the necessary amount of data. Processing this is not within the capability of every machine. And that brings us to our second limitation, computational power. Training a neural network requires graphical processing units, which have thousands of cores as compared to CPUs. And GPUs are, of course, more expensive. And finally, we come down to training time. Deep neural networks take hours or even months to train. The time increases with the amount of data and number of layers in the network. So here's a
Okay, so let me come back to the presentation, but you got the idea, right? The later half of the video follows the same technique that we saw in neural networks, but in deep learning, you teach it with a vast amount of data. But when you have to, and you have more layers in the neural network, that are the two main factors, right? Which differentiate deep learning from normal machine learning. Okay, so let me now take you back to the presentation and there's one more video, so please bear with me. I think I. Okay, so we did deep learning. Now, this is just what is the difference. As I said, the main part is the volume of data that is required. The process is almost the same, but the neural network also will have more layers. So you can read this, but these are the two critical things there. So you recall that they also said that you need more powerful processors. Actually, you need graphical processing units instead of just normal processing units. Your laptops come with something like a quad core at most, but these kind of work requires high powered computers with GPUs and multiple GPUs. Okay, now we look at one more concept which is equally important and related to artificial intelligence is NLP, that is natural language processing. Okay, essentially what this means is, can you teach the computer to listen to your spoken words, convert it into actual words in text form, and then again convert it into binary form, and then give it to the processor for processing. That is the main principle in natural language processing. It's a subfield of many things: linguistics, computer science, and artificial intelligence. So far we have been focusing on artificial intelligence, but in NLP you bring in linguistics, computer science, and artificial intelligence. Even if you go back to neural learning and all that, that 28 by 28 pixels, if you have understood how computer screens work, then you will know that how the screen is divided into pixels, and each pixel itself has 28 by 28 grid. But that is not critical for you to understand the concept. But if you know that, you will appreciate what is actually happening. Okay, so in NLP we are looking at linguistics, computer science, and artificial intelligence, right? It's a technology that many people use daily. And of course, things like spell check, autocomplete, speech to text, text to speech, voice commands, all of these are possible only when your computer has the capability to do natural language processing. So let's see a video on NLP, which is also equally lucid, and I'm sure you will find it useful.
Yeah.
Star Wars fans would be familiar with the golden life-sized hospitality robot.
Can you see the screen now of the video?
Yeah, Star Wars.
Yes, fine. Sorry.
Star Wars fans would be familiar with the golden life-sized hospitality robot C-3PO. While Star Wars might be set in a galaxy far, far away, the reality of having machines talk and respond to us in a human-like manner is already a reality, which keeps getting more and more realistic with every passing day. The people you ask for queries on websites, your smart assistants, even calls made over the internet, all of them have one thing in common. None of them are actually human. Now, you must be thinking, if they are not human, how do they manage to sound and seem so human-like? How do they respond to me so intelligently? And how are they so articulate? This, my friends, is the magic of natural language processing. What is NLP? Natural language processing, or NLP, refers to the branch of artificial intelligence that gives the machines the ability to read, understand, and derive meaning from human languages. NLP combines the field of linguistics and computer science to decipher language structure and guidelines, and to make models which can comprehend, break down, and separate significant details from text and speech. Every day, humans interact with each other through public social media, transferring vast quantities of freely available data to each other. This data is extremely useful in understanding human behavior and customer habits. Data analysts and machine learning experts utilize this data to give machines the ability to mimic human linguistic behavior. This helps save millions in terms of manpower and time, as you don't need to always have a person present at the other end of a phone. NLP is also a lot more widespread than you may realize. You use it every day in seemingly normal and insignificant situations. Don't know how to correctly spell a word? AutoCorrect has you covered. Need to see if your article or thesis will get flagged for copyright violations? That's okay. A plagiarism checker will search through the web and find any cases of published documents which may match your work line by line. While NLP seems really cool, yet a cutting-edge and complicated technology concept, it is actually pretty easy to learn. You start off with a document or an article. To make your algorithm understand what is going on in it, you need to process it into a form which is easily comprehensible by the machine. This is no different than making a child learn to read for the first time. We start off by performing segmentation, which is to break the entire document down into its constituent sentences. You can do this by segmenting the article along its punctuations, like full stops and commas. For the algorithm to understand these sentences, we get the words in a sentence and to explain them individually to our algorithm. So we break down our sentence into its constituent words and store them. This is called tokenizing, where each word is called a token. We can make the learning process faster by getting rid of non-essential words which do not add much meaning to our statement and are just there to make our statement sound more cohesive. These words, such as are, and, the, are called stop words. Now that we have the basic form of our document, we need to explain it to our machine. We first start off by explaining that some words like skipping, skips, skipped are the same word with added prefixes and suffixes. This is called stemming. We also identify the base words for different word tense, mood, gender, etc. This is called lemmatization, stemming from the base word lemma. Now we explain the concept of nouns, verbs, articles, and other parts of speech to the machine by adding these tags to our words. This is called part of speech tagging. Next, we introduce our machine to pop culture references and everyday names by flagging names of movies, important personalities or locations, etc., that may occur in the document. This is called named entity tagging. Once we have our base words and tags, we use a machine learning algorithm, like Naive Bayes, to teach our model human sentiment and speech. At the end of the day, most of the techniques used in NLP are simple grammar techniques that we have been taught in school. Here is a question for you.
Okay, so you can see, that how it actually works. Don't worry about technicalities. Actually, you'll appreciate it even better when you see it more than once. You need to see some of these videos more than once to understand exactly, how it is working. But at least I think it gives you a better picture than what you knew till now. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah, you're coming closer to what the machine is actually doing. But
Yes, sir.
look at the complexity that is involved. This is just one sentence, which is hardly 20 words. Just to break that up to teach it, you are actually teaching the machine complete grammar also.
Yeah.
You are actually teaching the whole grammar. So you can understand that these things take time, and then the language changes, you again start from scratch. So now you can understand the volume of work that is involved in doing these kind of algorithms. So again, you got the name of one algorithm, Naive Bayes. So that algorithm is more suitable for NLP kind of work. And that again, when you read, there is a book on algorithms which you can read, and you'll know what algorithm was made for what purpose. So actually people start with an idea. I want the computer to understand this language, and then they go deeper and deeper and deeper, and that is how the algorithms got created by different groups of people. That's why you have different algorithms. Okay, but this is how NLP works. NLP is the starting point for everything that Alexa does, or Siri does, or because first thing is you're speaking, it has to convert and it has to make it into binary, then it has to go and do some searches. And again, there